What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you 5 of my favorite recent indie games. Now, I do want to specify recent, as there are obviously a ton of indie games that get released all the time, and this particular list is just some of my favorites that I've played and messed around with over the past year. And with that said, I love playing indie games because they tend to be the driver of innovation in the gaming industry these days. Something I've noticed as somebody who reviews games for a living. Though, to be honest, if you just play a lot of games, I imagine you'd have noticed this as well. But your big AAA games tend to play it pretty safe. They go for the big blockbuster features that you see in pretty much every other AAA game. But with indie games, where the stakes are theoretically lower, and they have to do something to stand out, they tend to focus on systems and unique hooks that you just don't see in other places. And again, for me, someone who plays games for a living, any game that is genuinely unique is inherently more interesting to me. Because as a reference, I've reviewed 48 games this year already. And as much as I love tactical turn-based combat, there's really only so many ways you can do it, and I've seen and played pretty much all of them. But my point being that indie games drive innovation, and I would encourage more people to check these out, which is why we're going over this list today. So with no further ado, let's jump into 5 of some of my favorite recent indie titles, starting with Wildermyth. Wildermyth is a really cool kind of RPG, really. However, the focus is on emergent storytelling around your characters themselves. Each campaign that you can jump into will have either fresh characters for you to pick, or you'll be able to import previous characters that you've used, and the adventure will usually see them across a significant span of their life. In some cases, they'll actually retire, and as you go around adventuring, stories will pop up based on various character attributes that will change and influence that character's story, as well as their story with other party members, leading to, again, a lot of emergent storytelling. And while after a while you do start seeing some repeats, the idea is very sound. The stories that come from this are actually really good, and because of that, I remember Wildermyth very fondly. Now, beyond that, though, the combat is relatively simple, but the magic is a bit interesting. You sort of possess objects in the environment and then use them for magic, which is a novel system. But again, the character storytelling here is really innovative, and I'd love to see more of this elsewhere. But that brings us to number 2 on the list, and that is Weird West. This is an isometric immersive sim from Wolfeye Studios, which has some bigger names in the immersive sim genre working there. Weird West has a lot of things going for it. It's a sort of supernatural Wild West setting, which honestly we've seen quite a bit this year. Nonetheless, though, I think Weird West manages to stand out by being an immersive sim that is also isometric, which is not typically two things you see mashed together. And overall, I think it works pretty well. It had a couple pain points that may or may not have been fixed by now. It's been a little while. And I know they at least updated an optional controller scheme, but aiming your character can be a little strange. And then some of the interactions were a tiny bit buggy. But beyond that, the actual format of the game was largely that of a CRPG with, of course, the immersive sim elements, which I found could lead to a lot of very sudden and explosive gameplay that was generally very fun to do. Going in guns blazing was usually my favorite route just because of how interactive the environment tended to be, and how much of that environment you could actually use. You could jump up and get on top of all sorts of buildings, places you wouldn't think you should be, and there were just a lot of options to have really fun combat specifically with that game, though if you wanted to go more of a stealth route, that was very viable too. For the most part, it just took longer. And overall, it had a lot of really fun ideas that I would like to see more of in the future. That said, though, the format of this game was an anthology. You would play 5 stories, really, so you'd switch characters several times throughout the game, which would sort of reset the map in some ways, and there was no way to switch between them freely and play the ones you wanted to play, which felt a little clunky because of how they told the story, but overall, it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it a great deal. Now, third on our list, we have Cult of the Lamb. This is a relatively simple roguelite that mixes elements of a management sim with, again, roguelite dungeon crawling. However, we play a lamb, and our goal here is to set up and operate a cult while we try to free the deity giving us our unholy powers, known as the One Who Waits. And as you can of course see on screen, this has this sort of cutesy art style attached to it, which combined with all the dark eldritch horror going on, especially when you sacrifice your followers for power, leads to a juxtaposition that I really enjoyed. Now, if I'm being honest, outside of the aesthetic, there's not that much unique here, because again, it's pretty much a basic management sim where you manage your base to gain ever-increasing amounts of power, and then you go dive into dungeons that take like maybe 10 to 15 minutes at most, and that's kind of the gameplay loop. So nothing particularly innovative there, but all of it is done really well, which leads to a fun experience that lets you lead your own little cult of forest animals. But that of course brings us to number 4 on the list, and this is Powerwash Simulator. Now this is a weird one because this is the kind of game where if someone just had described it to me, I'd be like, wow, that sounds really dumb, because the name of the game pretty much sums it up. It is a simulator for power washing things. However, it does have a rather interesting story arc that gets really weird towards the end. There is an actual story to this game, but the bulk of the gameplay is just power washing, but in a game. And as absurd as that kind of sounds, it is at the same time actually really relaxing. I went and got all of the achievements for this game. I actually 100% the thing, though I didn't do a review because, you know, what's there to review? Your power washing stuff. But again, it's just a weirdly relaxing experience. And as someone who, again, plays a lot of strategy and tactical oriented games, playing a game where I just steadily completed an objective was a nice change of pace that I, again, just found very oddly relaxing. But that, of course, brings us to our last entry on the list, and this is none other than Betrayal at Club Low. This game is bizarre. We play as a sort of secret agent disguised as a pizza delivery man who is trying to infiltrate a club, Club Low, to free someone who has been taken hostage. The reason I like this game is because it is absurd and it makes me laugh. Now, effectively, this is just a narrative game where you roll a bunch of dice and hope things go your way. So it's not a particularly complicated game. You could do pretty much everything there is to do in like 10-ish hours. And I suppose the reason I like this game so much is because it just kept making me laugh. And as short as it is, there's like 11 different endings if my memory serves. So a lot of the time I spent with this game was just running around trying and doing every weird thing I could do to just see what bizarre thing happened next, because the bizarre stuff just keeps coming. And I like this game because, again, it's probably made me laugh more than just about any game has in a long time. And I genuinely enjoyed it as a result, and I would recommend people check it out. There you guys go. There are 5 of my favorite recent indie titles, but by all means let me know some of yours down in the comment section below. The indie world of gaming is constantly releasing games that don't get a lot of coverage, so this is hardly a conclusive list. I'm sure there's tons of great ones that I haven't even began to touch yet. But regardless of all that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But thank you again. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.